On the night of December 16, 1811, something happened in the middle of America that should have been impossible. The ground didn't just shake. The Mississippi River ran backwards. Entire forests were swallowed whole. Lakes formed overnight where flatlands had been for centuries. Church bells rang by themselves in Washington, D.C., nearly 1,000 miles away. People in Boston thought they were in an earthquake. They weren't, not even close. The new Madrid Seismic Event of 1811 to 1812 is considered the most powerful sequence of earthquakes in recorded North American history. And almost nobody talks about it. Why? Because what was standing before those earthquakes and what was left after tells a story that fundamentally rewrites what we think we know about early America. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this, a quick subscribe really helps the channel out. Let's get back to it. Stay with me for just 2 minutes, because I'm going to show you something that once you see it, you genuinely cannot unsee it. There is a theory growing in serious researcher communities, architectural historians and independent scholars, that before the America we know existed, there was another civilization. Not ancient ruins kind of civilization, not cave painting civilization. We're talking about massive buildings with ornate domes, Romanesque arches, advanced infrastructure and construction techniques that, according to official history, simply should not have existed here yet. This civilization has a name that's been almost completely scrubbed from Western academic discourse. Tartaria. Now, before you click away, I want you to hold your skepticism loosely, because what we're about to look at is not speculation. We're looking at photographs, we're looking at maps, we're looking at official government documents, and we're looking at a seismic event so catastrophic, so perfectly timed, that its aftermath cleared the ground for an entirely new origin story. This is not Europe, this is not Constantinople, this is not ancient Rome. This is documented, photographed early American architecture, and you will notice something immediately. This building is extraordinary, its proportions are perfect, its stonework is immaculate, its dome rivals anything constructed in the modern era. Now ask yourself a simple question. Who built this, when, and with what? According to the official timeline, the settlers who arrived in early America were largely surviving off the land. They were building log cabins. They were struggling with famine, with disease, with the brutal reality of frontier life. So who was constructing buildings that Renaissance architects would have wept to see? The 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, the White City. Official history tells us these magnificent, palatial, dome-studded structures were built in just 2 years. 2 years! Using period-correct technology, horse-drawn carts, hand tools, workers in wool vests. Professional architects have looked at these buildings and said, plainly and on record, that the mathematics of constructing these structures in that timeframe, with those resources, is somewhere between extremely unlikely and flat-out impossible. Unless they weren't built from scratch. Unless some of them were already there. Now let's go back to the night of December 16th, 1811. The new Madrid seismic zone sits across what is today Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Illinois. It is, by every geological measure, one of the most dangerous fault systems in North America. But in 1811, this region was home to something else entirely. It was home to a population, a thriving one, towns, settlements, trade routes, people who had built their lives along the Mississippi River and its tributaries. The first earthquake struck at approximately 2:15 in the morning, magnitude estimated between 7.5 and 8.1. The second, weeks later, even stronger. Then a third. Some scientists estimate it may have been the single most powerful earthquake to ever strike the continental United States. Magnitude 8.8, maybe higher. No instruments existed to accurately measure them. We are guessing, even now, at how violent these events truly were. Entire towns vanished. John James Audubon, the famous naturalist, was in the region. He described the ground rolling like ocean waves. He described the sound as something between a cannon barrage and the end of the world. The Shawnee leader Tecumseh, who had been prophesying a great earthquake to unite the indigenous nations, supposedly stamped his foot and said, "This is the sign." Whether that story is myth or memory, it tells you something. This event was so extraordinary that people built mythology around it in real time. And here is where it gets interesting. When explorers and surveyors arrived in the aftermath of the New Madrid earthquakes, they found ruins. Not ruins that could be easily explained by log cabins collapsing. Stone ruins, structural foundations of extraordinary complexity, archways, columns, evidence of prior, sophisticated occupation that predated any known colonial settlement. Official history quietly filed these findings under Native American earthworks or natural geological formations. But some researchers weren't satisfied with that answer, and they started pulling threads. The Tartary, sometimes spelled Tartaria, appears on European maps from the 1500s all the way through the early 1800s, not as a vague cultural region, as a nation, as a political and geographic entity. And then, around the early to mid-1800s, it disappears from the maps entirely. Not gradually, not the way empires usually fade, it just stops being labeled. And researchers who have dug into this, real researchers, not just internet theorists, have found something deeply strange. The architectural record in America from roughly 1790 to 1870 shows buildings that are stylistically inconsistent with what any isolated, resource-strapped frontier society should have been producing. Buildings that look Tartarian, that look like the architecture found across Russia, Central Asia, Eastern Europe, ornate, massive, domed, and ancient in feel, even when supposedly new. Same proportions, same ornamental language, same impossible grandeur. Now here is the theory that certain historians and alternative researchers are proposing. What if America was not a blank slate when European colonists arrived? What if there was already a civilization here, one connected, perhaps culturally or architecturally, to the broader Tartarian world? And what if a series of catastrophic events, including the New Madrid earthquakes, provided both the physical destruction and the historical cover story to erase that civilization from memory? The earthquakes destroy the physical evidence. The official narrative fills the vacuum. And within a generation, a new mythology, that of the rugged pioneer building civilization from nothing, becomes the founding story of a nation. Let's look at the clues, because if you know what to look for, they're everywhere. Clue 1, the orphan buildings. Across the American Midwest and South, right in the heart of the New Madrid impact zone, you find buildings that historians simply cannot fully account for. Structures whose architectural complexity far exceeds the supposed resources of the communities that supposedly built them. And in many cases, the official founding stories of these buildings don't quite add up when you start doing the math on labor, materials, and time. Clue 2, the sudden appearance of new cities. After the New Madrid sequence, the maps of the American interior are redrawn. New towns appear. Old towns that were supposedly thriving simply are no longer on the maps. The explanations range from earthquake destruction to they were never really there. But the archaeological record sometimes tells a different story. Layers of habitation that don't match the official timeline. Clue 3, the disappearing population. Estimates of the population living in the New Madrid seismic zone before 1811 vary wildly. Some official estimates seem suspiciously low, almost as if the numbers were constructed to minimize what was lost. Indigenous oral histories speak of far larger populations, far more complex societies, far older settlements. Clue 4, the architecture that survived. Here is perhaps the most quietly damning piece of evidence. In the areas least affected by the New Madrid earthquakes, the northeast, parts of the south, you have the most preserved examples of that extraordinary pre-Civil War architecture. Buildings that locals assume were built in the 1840s or 1850s, but whose construction techniques bear almost no resemblance to anything documented from that period. Go look at the old courthouses, the old government buildings, the old asylums and universities and train stations, not the ones that have been renovated, the untouched ones. Look at the stonework, look at the joinery, look at the proportions and ask yourself honestly, who taught these people to build like this? There is a broader framework that some researchers call the reset theory or the mud flood theory. It proposes that in the 18th and 19th centuries, one or more catastrophic events, seismic, climactic, or otherwise, effectively reset human civilization in certain parts of the world. That populations were drastically reduced, that sophisticated infrastructure was buried, literally under feet of sediment, and that the survivors, or newcomers, built their new world on top of the old one, either not knowing what lay beneath, or knowing very well and choosing not to say. The evidence cited includes buildings with lower floors clearly buried under street level. You can see this in hundreds of American cities, if you know where to look. Basement windows that were clearly once street-level windows. Ground floors that match no architectural logic for basement construction, but make perfect sense if the ground simply rose around them. Old city infrastructure, sewers, tunnels, foundation systems that are far more sophisticated than what the official founding dates of those cities would suggest was possible. And here, the New Madrid earthquakes become crucial once again. An earthquake of sufficient magnitude doesn't just destroy structures, it liquefies soil. It causes the ground to behave temporarily like water. When that process settles, the landscape is profoundly changed. Things that were above ground can end up below it. And the physical record of what existed before gets buried. Quite literally. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Even if this is true, so what? What does it change? Everything. If there was a sophisticated civilization in North America that was erased, whether by natural catastrophe alone, or by natural catastrophe combined with deliberate historical revision, then everything we've been taught about the foundations of this country is at minimum incomplete, and at maximum a carefully constructed fiction. The narrative of manifest destiny, the idea that European settlers arrived in a vast, empty, uncivilized wilderness and built something from nothing, that narrative does a lot of ideological work. It justifies, it erases, it creates a story of origin that conveniently has no prior claims. But what if the wilderness wasn't empty? What if the nothing was once something extraordinary? And what if the earthquakes, those impossible, biblical-scale earthquakes of 1811 and 1812, were the event that made the story possible? That provided the physical disruption, the death, the destruction of records and structures and communities that allowed a new story to be written on the rubble. That is not a comfortable thought. It shouldn't be. To be clear, mainstream geology fully acknowledges the New Madrid earthquakes. They are in the textbooks. The USGS has entire sections devoted to them. What mainstream history does not adequately address is the civilizational impact, the loss of what was there before, the question of who and what was living in one of the most seismically devastated regions in American history. And mainstream architectural history does not adequately explain the buildings. Not really. The story of the 1893 World's Fair alone should keep serious historians up at night. The claim that those structures, rivaling anything in Europe, were built in under 2 years by a newly industrializing nation, and then demolished almost entirely within a few years of the fair closing, stretches credibility. Why demolish them? If you had just demonstrated to the world that America could produce architecture of that caliber, why would you tear it down? Unless the reason you were tearing it down was actually that you were hiding what it truly was, that those buildings had been found, restored, repurposed for the fair, and then, when the show was over, the evidence needed to go away again. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm telling you what the evidence raises as questions. And I'm telling you that those questions deserve better answers than we've been given. The Mississippi River ran backwards. Churches rang by themselves. The ground ate entire forests. And in the aftermath, a civilization's worth of evidence disappeared, under rubble, under sediment, under a new national mythology built on the idea that this land was empty, waiting, and ready to be filled by the right kind of people. Go look at the old buildings in your city, not the renovated ones, the weathered ones, the ones with the buried windows, the disproportionate grandeur, the stonework that no official historical record fully explains. Look at them and ask the question that official history has never quite answered. Who built this? Because somewhere between the geological record, the architectural record, and the historical record, there is a truth that is larger and stranger and more ancient than the story we have been told. And the earthquakes of 1811 did not begin the story. They ended one. If this video made you ask questions, good. That's the whole point. Hit subscribe because we go deeper every single week. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. And share this with one person who you know is ready to start asking different questions. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and never stop looking.